Hey guys, it's Matt. Welcome back to the channel. This is Beard of Darkness Book Reviews, and today we're going to be talking about 5 different trilogies, sagas, and standalones that I feel are underrated and that you should read. All right, we'll start off with The Library of the Unwritten by A.J. Hawkwith. And this is part of Hell's Library trilogy, and it's about books that are living in hell, and this wing of Hell's Library is called the Unwritten Wing. So they all have somewhat of a soul, these unwritten books, and the authors haven't written them yet, and they want to be alive. So sometimes these books actually come to life, and because they want to be read, or they believe that they're real, the characters in these books, they have to be killed essentially and put back on the shelf until the author in the real world writes them. I highly recommend it to anybody who kind of wants to take a break from maybe a really dark series. Say if you just read Malazan, or if you have just read a long trilogy or a long saga, and you kind of want to read something of fantasy but not so serious. I would absolutely read these books. They're very good. It's very imaginative, and there's somewhat of a dark tone to it, but it's also fun and can be humorous in some areas. But it's very original, I think, in its idea. So, yeah, I would absolutely recommend this series, Hell's Library. The next one is written by James Rollins, the master of suspense and thriller, I think, who originally started in the fantasy genre by the moniker of James Clemens, and actually we'll be getting to his very first book here later on in this video, but I want to recommend this one first. It's written by James Rollins and Rebecca Cantrell, and it's the Order of the Sanguine series, and it's amazing. It's about the Catholic Church in Rome. Um, there's a lot of fantasy aspects. There's bloodlust. There's a lot of magic being used, not in the ordinary sense of magic, but the fact that they can heal themselves and become more powerful by blood. But they really try to do good by their order in the Catholic Church and not kill people for their blood. And if you read the series, you'll kind of figure out what I'm saying. I highly recommend it. It's a little less fantasy, other than the fact that they are not vampires by any means, but because they lust for blood, they find themselves in situations. They're really old. It gives a little bit of history. There's villains. There's um, they're bad people, the Order of the Sanguines, in their past lives, but they also are good people now who try to fight that bloodlust and find themselves trying to help in the cause of good. And the duo here, they do a great job in writing together. James Rollins and Rebecca Cantrell by themselves are great authors and artists of the written word. So I absolutely recommend the Sanguine series, the Order of the Sanguine series by both of these authors. Now, I mentioned one of these books in one of my other reviews. If you want a good coming of age, a very high fantasy sort of um, trilogy, it's The Raveling by Alec Hudson. He's very good at character driven stories. He starts with a young man, Kalen. He's a very young person who's living in a fishing village, and he finds himself being in a world of forbidden magic where he is whisked away on this journey because of who he is, and it's a really good coming of age story. It's a 3-book trilogy, and I highly recommend this because he is very confident in his narrative. He's got a great tone to his book. The character arc is one of the more common ones. that the coming of age, but he does it in a unique way. It's fast paced, but it takes nothing away from the characters. The world is great. It's a vast world, but he explores most of it. The Raveling series, that's a trilogy, and I would absolutely recommend it fully, 100%. It's a less serious type of fantasy series, and the fact that there's three, they're middle-sized books. They're not huge. They're definitely no 800-page books, but they're around 400 pages each. I think one is 500 pages, but it's a good break from the dark overtone maybe that you're reading with Malazan, like I said earlier, or even if you just want to read a less serious kind of triumphant coming-of-age book. Each one of these books would do you right. The next of these is Ordinary Monsters by J.M. Miro. It is part of the Talents trilogy. Now, there's only one of these books available right now that have been written. The second comes out, and I believe it's called The Dustbringer. It will be released in 2024. Highly anticipated by me personally. This is the book that got me back into fantasy, and it's called Ordinary Monsters. It is a dark academia. It starts to be. It's a very, very good gathering of orphans, highly sought out by this academy, set in 19th century London, and it's got a very dark overtone to it. It's got one villain who's after pretty much everybody in this, all the characters, but there's characters that come together and they're all brought forth to this academy ran by a woman and a man who also are seeking the talents. So if you're into characters who have special abilities and it's a little bit of a gothic, dark overtone to the book, it's very well written, and there is a second and a third book planned to be written by him, J.M. Miro. I highly recommend this trilogy. And I saved the best for last. This is James Clement's very first published work. It is called Witchfire, part of the Bound and Broken saga. There was a 5-book saga, and they're all written, they're all finished, and this is a band of, there's witches, there's ogres, there are trolls, there's everything that you'll love if you're a fan of fantasy. Probably one of my very favorite and super underrated sagas in fantasy, because James Rowlands does a lot of thrillers. He does the Sigma Force series. Gosh, there's so many books in that series, and he does it well. But this is where he started. This is where I found respect for him, and I read his thrilling, suspenseful Sigma Force series just because of his fantasy series. I follow him because of my respect for this stuff. And like I said, it's a 5-part saga, and he starts it off with a female. She's a young girl, and she's separated because her brother is kidnapped, and joining her force of good-to-do characters. So if you're into a band of characters who are all different, have a different reason for being there, and different forms, I absolutely recommend this Bound and Broken saga. Thanks again for joining me, guys. Please subscribe and like and comment below if you have other series or sagas that you would recommend that are underrated. I really want to hear about them. Until next time, stay imaginative, guys.